I'm here with Ann Panessa, the district coordinator. Many of you know her as your teacher of USF EL cohort certification. We're going to ask her a few of your questions generated from the QFT that we did the other day, last class. So you can take some notes so that you can further on your work with your capstone. All right, Ann.
All right, I'm ready.
So first of all, roughly how many students are in our district who are probably EL certified or EL qualified?
Currently, right now, we have about 200 students that qualify for EL services. We have several other students that do speak more than one language, but they do not qualify to receive direct ESL services or bilingual services. And that is throughout all of the buildings in the district.
Great. And what is our program called, if you could name it?
Sure. We have two main programs here in Batavia. Our first is our TPI, which is for students that speak a language other than Spanish, or for those Spanish speakers that no longer qualify for our bilingual program or opt out of bilingual services but still would like English language support. So that's a transitional program of instruction where we use best practices in second language acquisition to make sure, one, that the students are able to access grade level content, and two, they are working on their English language development. And that's a great question that people outside of education have. What if you have a new student move in from Russia? How do you teach that student? Well, not all of us know Russian, so we can't provide that native language support. However, there are definitely things that we could do that you'll be learning more about in our cohort, using visuals, modeling, making things as clear as possible, tapping into that prior knowledge in native language. And we're very lucky with technology today, it's easier to do so. But once any one attendance center hits 20 students or more speaking the same native language, then by law, we are required to offer a TBE program, which is Transitional Bilingual Education. And here in Batavia, we have a self-contained bilingual kindergarten program in Spanish, a self-contained first grade classroom in Spanish, and now a self-contained 2-3 program in Spanish. And the goal is to utilize that native language and those funds of knowledge that our children come to us in and really strengthen that and bridge them over into their English acquisition. And ideally, we want all of those students to become biliterate. We don't want them to give up their native language of Spanish. We want to build on that and help them be able to successfully operate in all 4 domains in both languages. So listening, speaking, reading, and writing, both in English and in Spanish, is definitely the goal with that. So that's a quick glimpse of our program here. Our TPI services, those English as a second language services, can either be a pullout where the students leave their regular gen ed classroom and work in a small group or individually with the ESL certified teacher, or it can be a push-in program where the ESL teachers actually co-plan and then teach within the classroom to help support the students both academically and with language acquisition.
Beautiful. What is our program's goal or objective? And I did hear you say 2 things. One is to access the grade level content, and the second would be language acquisition, really acquiring the language that they need. But anything else you want to add on?
Correct. Those are definitely 2 of the main goals. But another is to really, I think we all have a responsibility in helping those students identify as being pride in being multilingual and celebrating multiculturalism. And just, and I believe I shared this in class before, but at the middle school level, I had parents that were heartbroken because their children didn't want to speak in Spanish anymore, or their native language, whether it be Urdu or Farsi, or they were letting that go and just assimilating to American culture. which again, we'd love for them to be successful with their English and acquire that. But it's so important to guard that native language and that cultural identification and celebrating that. And as teachers and as schools, we can really help foster that pride and that acceptance of diversity and really celebration of diversity of all of our cultures and unique backgrounds, especially now as the world is shrinking, with people collaborating and working at same companies in different locations around the world, but working on projects together. And that more than ever, the globe is certainly shrinking, and we could start laying those foundational seeds now of kids feeling pride about who they are, and not only being okay if you speak more than one language, but to really have that pride and learning more about each other's cultures as well.
Perfect. So again, this seems like an overlap as well, but how are the students placed in the bilingual program? I know that first, if your attendance center has 20 or more speakers of one language, you need to host a bilingual program.
Correct. And in our case, we also will bus students over that qualify for our bilingual program. So if we have a kindergartner, first, second, or third grader at another school that could benefit from native language instruction, we're able to have them attend the program here at Storm because it is our one central location for bilingual programming. But to qualify for the program, one, the student really needs to have that native language background in Spanish. We've had students in the past where maybe parents speak Spanish in the home, but the children didn't really speak Spanish. And the parents were seeking this out as an opportunity for them to learn Spanish, and that's really not the intent of our program. The program is for students that once they're screened, we identify them as having the native language Spanish skills that they would need to be successful in the program, as well as qualifying for ESL services. If they have very strong Spanish skills, but then also they don't screen or qualify for English language support services, then they would not qualify for the program either. So there's really two factors. One would be having the strength in Spanish, and then two would be having that, I don't like to use the word deficit, but qualifying on the English language screener is being someone that needs English language support services to be successful within the academic setting. And then parents have the right. They need to either opt for their child to participate in that, or the parents can choose to say, well, no, we don't want them taught in Spanish. And unfortunately, some parents have had a negative background or a negative experience or heard of other negative experiences from others or their own experience growing up. And some of them don't want that and only want the ESL services, which is fine too. And then you have another set of parents which might opt out of supports altogether and feel that immersion or, oh, I learned it when I came and my kids can too. So it really is also dependent on the parents as well.
And this is kind of to go along with what you're talking about. What is done if students are incorrectly placed in the program? And I know we had this, you were just alluding to, the parents having a different conception of a program. We would like our child to learn Spanish, but not really saying that, and then the student qualifying. So what is done?
Correct. Well, we had one situation where a student was placed into the bilingual program, but the teacher realized pretty quickly that this child did not have the Spanish skills needed to benefit academically, especially in kindergarten. At the beginning of the year, about 90% of that instruction is in Spanish. So just imagine yourself in a Swahili classroom for 90% of the day. Academically, there could be gaps that grow pretty quickly. So in that case, we did more investigation and we really shared our concerns, with those parents, and over time we were able to switch her into the general education kindergarten class and then provide her ESL services. So that's one example of misidentification. Other times we could have students that move in from other districts where the necessary paperwork may not be there, or through our own system, they may not get caught as they register. And then, that's where it's important for us to have checks in place. Anyone who's labeled as LEP or Limited English Proficient within the state Illinois student system, SIS, then we need to be aware of that and get them the proper services right away, get those folders from previous schools. But we've had some cases where we didn't get information, or kids come in from another state, and that's when the gen ed teacher can say, hey, I don't know if the home language survey was indicated as another language being spoken, but I suspect this could be a factor for the student, reaching out to the ESL specialist in that building and having them screened, but also making sure all of our secretaries that do process our students are aware of the importance of that home language survey. If that other language is spoken, making sure that information gets to the ESL teacher right away so we could properly identify those students. So we're always working to improve our process so we don't have kids with the wrong placement.
Perfect. And I was just reading the next question. I think we already covered it, but how do we identify that students are correctly placed? I think you just answered that.
Right. So, but I'd like to mention too that once students exit, so once they meet the criteria on the access scores, they still can qualify for services. We can no longer change their notification in the state system as LEP, so we don't receive grant funding for them. But Batavia as a district feels really strongly about providing these student services as long as they need to be successful in the monolingual classroom. So even if a child somehow does great on a test, they hit that exit criteria, we're legally responsible to monitor them for 2 years, which would be the ESL teacher checking in with their classroom teacher. But beyond that, we can pull them back in for services without changing their identification. That's another way to identify kids unofficially, even if they still need those supports.
Perfect. Where did BPS 101 get the model we are currently using?
So our TBE and TPI programs are very common throughout the country, actually, but definitely throughout the state and our surrounding counties. Another program that is common in our area would be a dual language program, and that would be the goal for all students within a classroom to attain both languages. So you might have 50% of the students that are monolingual Spanish speakers and the other 50% monolingual English speakers, and they are taught together in a self-contained classroom simultaneously throughout the day, sometimes spent in English, sometimes spent in Spanish. And the goal is for all of those kids to come out biliterate. It's a phenomenal program model, but it is harder to implement to get the proper staffing in place. So not every district has that. There are some in our area that do, some of the larger ones that do. But us having the transitional bilingual education program, we really want to make sure our kids hold that native language and become biliterate. And then I'd like to look for other ways to help our monolingual kids that are interested learn Spanish. So looking to the possibility of Spanish Club or tapping into our native language Spanish speakers to help teach some of our monolingual English kids. So definitely, more we can do with that.
And I'm sorting through the questions because they are very related to everything you're saying. So I think the next one is, or how is biliteracy valued and or taught?
All right, so biliteracy, let's go the valued first. That is a core belief of our program. That is our goal for our students. Again, we don't want them to lose their Spanish. The goal isn't for them to graduate from Spanish into English, but to really guard and develop their Spanish skills while simultaneously helping them bridge over and grow into English and acquire that as well. So that is the goal. within our self-contained bilingual classrooms, they do receive academic instruction both in Spanish and then bridging over into English. For example, if you're learning about the life cycle of the butterfly, that initial exposure may be in Spanish. So there would be movies in Spanish about that. There would maybe be Brain Pop Espanol about the butterfly life cycle, different things that they would interact and do. But then that teacher could help them bridge over with those same academic vocabulary words, those concepts into English. So if they know about this butterfly life cycle in Spanish, you don't need to teach them from scratch about it in English. You need to build those connections and bridges as far as vocabulary, but then you could have them expand or extend what they're doing with their newly acquired information in English to really give them the opportunity to use it in meaningful ways.
Awesome. And
side note,
yeah.
Something new in the state of Illinois, which is on my target list, is something called the Seal of Biliteracy. And that is available. It actually goes on a student's high school diploma where they are certified by the state of Illinois as being biliterate, which could potentially help them into different colleges or different careers. So that is something I definitely want to look towards bringing to our students here in Batavia, having that opportunity. Some districts are just launching it last year and this year, but again, something we would like to do here as well.
So awesome. So I'm torn. There's a couple questions. Let's go for how is cross-cultural education encouraged in the building or throughout the program? And then I'm going to pair it with another question. How are students who are not ESL taught about culture and sharing, etc.?
All right, good questions. And again, I think a definite growth area. Some of the things we do as a department is planning a multicultural evening or experience, which is great. And we had a lot of activities in that plan, but that is one evening out of the whole school year. We also do a Dia de los Muertos celebration, and that's open to everyone in the district. But again, so now we're at 2 evenings throughout. So I really feel that that's something we need to do through ESL teachers in the building, through bilingual teachers in the building, and just really providing opportunities to explore and celebrate cultures within classrooms, within grade levels, with some cross-teaming, as well as whole buildings. So we do, have a couple of large structures in place, but that's definitely a priority, is to make sure we're bringing in children's literature that celebrates cultures, bringing in opportunities for children to share where they're from. I know a lot of ESL teachers will put a world map outside of their classrooms and have the students identify where they're from and tend to do some more of that cultural exploration in that. But definitely the more we could do across buildings is really beneficial. I would encourage everyone to check out peaceoneday.org, and I think we should pull that up and share that.
Writing it down.
Okay, good. It's all around September 21st, which is International Peace Day, but there are free educational resources on there that really celebrate diversity. Students even sign a pledge where they talk about not only actions that they will make to bring peace to the world, but not standing by and tolerating any bullying based on differences, including race or culture or language. So there's definitely some great resources out there, but it's a matter of intentionally planning those and making sure they happen. I'd also encourage everyone to check out Brain Pop. They have some great animated videos about different cultural celebrations around winter holidays or just sharing a lot about different cultures. So that's a great way to bridge things. The Globe or Guardian Eyewitness is another one. Should always preview, and I'll be happy to show you these resources as well. But those are beautiful pictures from around the world. And I remember using those in my middle school classroom, and some of my female students that would wear the hijab or the traditional headgear, their faces would light up when I shared a picture out of India or another country where there were girls their age wearing that hijab, and they were able to talk about it, or different locations or different cultural celebrations. And students really light up and like seeing that and like being able to share it with other students.
Awesome. I think we're going to get into some logistical questions.
All right.
How do students exit the ELL program?
All right. So this is something that was updated in 2014. And again, every student indicated as being limited English proficient by our screeners and within the state of Illinois system is required to take the annual access test, which measures English language development across all 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And the new criteria, which really raised the bar, because again, we want these kids to be successful in monolingual gen ed classrooms. And in the past, there was some concern that it might have been too lenient and they exited before they were really ready to be academically successful. So with the change in 2014, so the test is rated on a scale of 1 to 6. 1 would be brand new, just new to English, just starting out. And 6 would be proficient, like a native English language speaker. So they need an overall composite score of 5 or higher, but there are 2 additional criteria they need to meet. They also need to have a 4.2 or higher in reading and a 4.2 or higher in their writing. All 3 criteria need to be met in order for those students to exit the program. So once in a while, we've seen students with a score that meet that 5.0 composite. Maybe they had a 6 in oral language and they're speaking, a 6 in listening, but their writing score is typically the one that comes into place later. If that one is below the 4.2 or the reading is below that, then they stay within the program and still receive support services until they meet those standards.
Perfect. And I think you kind of answered this one as well, but how are schools held accountable to state mandates and requirements?
Right. So a lot of that, to receive any of our funding, that's through our Title III grant, where we have to fill out all of that information for the district. It identifies what students we have at what locations, who our qualified ESL certified or bilingual certified teachers are, to be able to provide those services, and then the number of minutes they qualify based on their access level and how we deliver those support services. So there are definitely checks in place to make sure we are providing the required services and what our students need to be successful. There are also state visits that happen. I think we're at about every 4 years now, where representatives through ISB, through DEL, which is the Department of English Language Learning, will come into a district and they'll randomly check student files. They will interview parents, they will interview teachers, they will interview students, and just do a hands-on check of what the programming looks like at every school.
Okay. There are so many good ones. Is there a bilingual curriculum used here in Batavia? I think we can answer that one.
Correct. So our curriculum is the same across the board. It's all driven by the Common Core State Standards. Those essential understandings that we've identified academically need to be learned at every grade level. So that curriculum is the same. However, we may teach that curriculum in Spanish as we're building on those students' native language, and then as we're bridging them into English. So the curriculum looks the same. We want all of our kids, and this can be challenging, and an ESL teacher can have a very challenging job. If you have a student that's newly moved in from another country, speaking a language you don't speak, we want to make sure they're still exposed to that 5th grade curriculum or that 8th grade curriculum. Or it is our job to make sure they are receiving that academic content at whatever English level they're currently at. So not always an easy job, but that is the job we're charged with. We can't, in the past, I would like to say many, many years ago, let's go decades ago, curriculum was watered down. Or, let's say a fifth grader moved in, they'd be given a kindergarten or first grade book because it's easier English. That obviously is not acceptable. They need to be exposed to the same concepts and content of fifth grade, but looking for those supports and resources that will help them do that at their current English level. So not only the instructional part, but also the assessment. We have to make sure if a student is being assessed in math, science, social studies, English, it doesn't become an English language test, but a way for them to show what they know about those concepts, ideas, and essential understandings.
Awesome answers. I'm looking at, week 7, bilingual versus non-bilingual. It's an assignment that they'll have. So I wondered if we could talk about, let's see, do we have any info about long-term success of students who are in bilingual classrooms?
Absolutely, and I'll actually look for some of those studies or a synopsis of those studies. There's been a lot of research out there. Collier has done quite a bit. I actually live with a person that earned his doctorate on this very topic. So I have a handy resource there as well. But the studies show that in the long run, students in bilingual education programs actually end up typically outperforming their monolingual peers. And there's a lot of information about the bilingual brain, having that flexibility, being able to draw quick connections, infer things, using their funds from both languages. And there can be a period where, as they're still acquiring English, again, and I think it goes back to if the assessments aren't always appropriate that they're receiving, they could look to be not as successful academically as monolingual peers who are being tested at their English language level. But over time, studies do show that the bilingual students taught in native language and bridged over into English or in dual language programs do perform at the same level or oftentimes outperform monolingual students. But it is a multi-year investment, so it does take time. But I will look for the synopsis and some of those studies to back that up.
Yeah, and I'll stop the video right here in the class because I want to talk about some research from a preschool experience that I had as a consultant. The outcomes were unbelievable for the bilingual students, but we'll continue. Is there maximum years that the student may or can receive services? You kind of talked about this, that Batavia believes in supporting as much as they need.
Correct. So per the state of Illinois, the only way to exit from recommended services is through meeting that exit criteria on the access test. Beyond 3 years, we do communicate with parents every year to let them know their child still qualifies for services, and parents can opt out. Most don't, I'm happy to say, or I'm happy to call them on the phone and try and help them understand how it's really there to help their child. And again, I think a lot of this is in the past, maybe previous decades, I'm hoping, where there was a negative stigma to needing ESL services because a lot of parents felt it was that watered down curriculum. My child will fall behind. I think in the past too, it was seen as a negative. Oh, these kids don't speak English. What are we going to do? We've got to, get them that. And there was a negative stigma associated to that. So a lot of times parents would turn down services. They didn't want a label on their child. So again, that's really the job of schools and our district and individual teachers as much as possible to celebrate multilingualism. We view that as an asset, definitely not as a negative, in that multiculturalism. So again, even if a student's with us from kindergarten through high school, if they don't meet that criteria, they still qualify and are encouraged to have ESL services. And in fact, the state the way they word it, they want it very clear to parents that that is state recommended, that they receive those supports. The parents, and we'll look for the wording, but it's like a denial of recommended services. It is very clear. It's not even an opt-out that doesn't, they really want parents understanding you are denying your child services we recommend for their academic success.
Yeah, refusing too.
Yeah,
I've heard that, refusing service. And you're kind of talking about my favorite way to get families involved in school activities and parent outreach, you know, just by making the calls, you know, texting them or emailing them or anything you can on a more daily, consistent basis.
Correct.
But and communicating the program. But how can we get more ELL families involved in school activities, but also what outreach is available?
Right. So we do have a bilingual parent advisory committee meeting that meets 4 times a year, where we share information about the program and ways parents can support learning at home. And that's open to definitely our bilingual parents, but other ESL parents as well. But again, I think it's reaching out, like Julie said, making sure those parents feel very comfortable. And if they are more comfortable speaking in their native language, that our teachers are very comfortable in using the translation services, the telephone services, to still build and continue that communication, sharing good news, welcoming them in, even inviting them to come in and maybe share something from their culture within the classroom setting. And I think we want all of our parents to feel welcome and feel in partnership with us on our student success. However, you know, in some of these instances, and you put yourself in their shoes, if you were in another country, you may not know how that school system works or how to navigate that. So I think we really have an obligation to go out of our way to make those parents feel welcome, inviting them in, just like we would from maybe another parent that just doesn't participate as much. And without judgment, just making sure that we're celebrating, you know, what they can bring, or reaching out to them as much as possible to build those relationships.
Perfect. Last question, and the rest I'll answer during the class this evening, I should say. How do our programs differ from the elementary school, middle school, and high school?
All right. So every building has an ESL teacher working within that building. And then Storm is our only bilingual center, where we also have bilingual teachers. But every elementary building has an ESL teacher that provides those push-in or pull-out supports. Over at Rotolo, we have an ESL specialist who teaches some ESL 1 or ESL 2 classes to help students acquire that academic English, as well as providing academic language supports. There are resource classes as well, and same with the high school. We have an ESL specialist there as well. So from EC, where all of our EC teachers are ESL certified, all the way up through high school, we provide services to our Batavia students.
Wonderful. Well, I hope this was helpful, and we will share this Google folder with all of you. I will at the end of class tonight, so that you can utilize this information to get a good start on your capstone.
If you have any follow-up questions, we'll be here. So keep track of those, and happy to get information for you.
Thank you so much.